Okay, good evening, and we will start today's class. And as we have started from yesterday, we talked about yesterday romanticism, romantic movement, a short description on the distinction between classicism and romanticism, right? And also about French Revolution and how French Revolution uh, impacted romanticism as a movement, right? And shortly about these poets of romantic age and all, right? So far as this blocks for this particular course 109 is concerned, we have blocks like, for example, four blocks we have within this 109 paper. Block 1 deals with British Romantic literature, 1, and it has the Romantic Age, the introduction, George Crabbe, The Village, Book 1, and in Unit 3, you have William Blake, The Tiger, The Lamb, and The Chimney Sweeper. So, in block number 1, we have 3 units to cover. Unit 1, The Romantic Age and Introduction. Unit 2, George Crabbe, The Village, Book 1. And Unit 3, William Blake's poems, The Tiger, The Lamb, and The Chimney Sweeper. Okay. So far as other blocks are concerned, we have within 2, 3, and 4, we have 3 important blocks. And within these blocks, we have, for example, in block number 2, we have British Romantic Literature Part 2, where we have 4 units. Unit 1, we have William Wordsworth's poems, Ode on Intimations of Immortality from Recollection of Early Childhood, lines composed a few miles above Tinton Abbey. And within Unit 2, you have Samuel Taylor Coleridge, The Rime of the Ancient Mariner, and also about ballad, tradition and its summary. Within Unit 3, you have The Rime of the Ancient Mariner, analysis and literary elements of Sweeper. And Unit 4, The Rime of the Ancient Mariner, analysis and literary elements of Sweeper, both. In block number 3, you have British Romantic Literature Part 3, and we have 4 units here. Unit 1, Charles Lamb, A Dissertation upon Roast Pig, Summary and Analysis. Unit 2, you have Lord Byron, Roll on Thou Deep and Dark Blue Ocean. And also, you have George III from The Vision of Judgment. And in Unit 3, you have Shelley, Ode to the West Wind. We will talk about Ode to the West Wind as well. We have Ode to a Skylark by Percy Bysshe Shelley. And we have Unit 4, John Keats, Ode on a Grecian Urn and Ode to a Nightingale. This is about your block 3. In block 4, we have Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, the whole of it. Mary Shelley's life and works in Unit 1. We will discuss about Frankenstein as a Gothic novel in Unit 2. And in Unit 3, we'll be talking about Frankenstein's summary and analysis. And lastly, about the major themes of this particular work under Unit 4. So this is all about your 109 paper. So this much, of course, we have to deal with. All right. So as we had already started in yesterday's class, we'll take it further to the age, romantic age, and also about other aspects. So far as the introduction to the romantic age is concerned, we will talk about background to the romantic movement. We had already talked about the definition of romanticism, right? Salient features of romanticism in yesterday's class. We'll talk a little bit, and then we'll move on to early romantic poets. Early romantic poets like James Thomson, Mark Akenside, then Joseph Warton, then William Collins, Thomas Gray, William Gray, William Cowper, and also we'll be talking about Robert Burns, 1759 to 1796, and his use of folk song, his themes, his form, vocabulary, rhyme, love poems, and all. All right. And after this, I will move on to William Blake, William Wordsworth, St. Coleridge, and along with St. Coleridge, we'll deal with Lord Byron, P.B. Shelley, and John Keats. Hmm. So these poets will have to deal while dealing with the introduction to Romantic Age, because these poets had played the role of precursors of the Romantic Age. That's why we need to talk about these poets a little bit. So, as we have already talked about Romanticism as a movement, we will talk about a little bit the background to this Romantic movement, and we'll move on to the other aspects of these poets. So, historians of English literature have designated the period from 1798 to 1832 as the Romantic period, because as I told you yesterday, you can start Romantic age from 1789 and also 1798, and it can range to around 1850. But since in 1832 there was the introduction of Reform Bill, that's why many say that the Romantic age ends here in 1832, because from this, you see, the Victorian period starts, because the Reform Bill is introduced in 1832. That's why. So you can either start the Romantic age from 1789 to 1832, or from 1798 to 1850, around 1850. So England, after this introduction of Reform Bill, moved from being a primarily agricultural to modern industrialized society. Thus, the balance of power passed on from the land-owning aristocracy to the owners of industrial units, which employed large numbers of people. Because yesterday we talked about the Industrial Revolution and how it impacted the French Revolution, and how French Revolution and Industrial Revolution jointly impacted the Romantic age to flourish. Okay. In the political arena, there were revolutions of far-reaching consequences to England. The American Revolution led to the Declaration of Independence in 1776. So at that point of time, American War of Independence was also going on, and around in 1776, the Declaration of Independence was done there. And then at that point of time, the French Revolution was a shattering and sundering event which affected the whole of Western Europe in several ways. So we have Industrial Revolution, we have French Revolution, and we also have Declaration of American Independence in 1776. And these three things actually impacted the flourishing of the Romantic age. And the French Revolution was a shattering and sundering event, as I told you. And it received enthusiastic support in the beginning from the liberals and radicals in England. So whoever were at the point of time, whoever was liberal and radical, that person used to support this French Revolution, because at the point of time, monarchy was everywhere prevailing, and French Revolution introduced the concepts of democratic values. That is why this French Revolution was highly appreciated or highly supported by these liberals and radicals, okay, in England. And the Declaration of the Rights of Man by the French National Assembly was welcomed at the point of time, as we talked about in the last class. Edmund Burke disapproved the events in France in his reflection on the revolution in France in 1790. And we have Tom Paine, who issued a spirited rejoinder to Burke in his Rights of Man between 1791 to 1792. Tom Paine actually pleaded for a democratic republic for England by peaceful or violent means. Another book, that is Inquiry Concerning Political Justice, that is 1793, by William Godwin, made a great impact on Wordsworth, Shelley, and others. So these books and these events really influenced these writers and poets. Godwin predicted that eventually all poverty would be distributed equally and all government would disappear. Later events in the French Revolution, notably the execution time, beings of the royal family, the guillotine of innocent people during the Reign of Terror and Napoleon's dictatorship, disenchanted the early supporters. Then what happened? The economic sphere also saw great convulsions, and the manufacturing class became more powerful than the agricultural class, as I told you in the last class. With the invention of James Watt's steam engine, which replaced wind and water as sources of energy in 1765, there was a revolutionary change in the means and pace of production, and the majority of population of England was becoming either owners and traders or wage earners without property. So the society was divided between uh, the haves and the have-nots just after the introduction of the industrial revolution and just after the invention of the steam engine, because steam engine replaced uh, wind and water sources, right? Thus, the people were effectively divided into the rich and the poor, as I told you. With the introduction of more machinery into industry, cloned, there was a more unemployment. So there was an unemployment crisis in the society. The soldiers demobilized after the French wars aggravated the labor market, and there was an economic depression in 1815 caused by the fall in wartime demand for manufactured goods. So, these political, economic, and social factors caused agitations and riots by the working class, and the ruling class responded by more repressive measures. And the unrest culminated in passing the Reform Bill, which met the political aspirations of at least some sections of the population. There were important developments in other spheres as well. For example, Captain James Cook circumnavigated the globe around 1768 to 1771 and discovered Australia and the Sandwich Islands. And fascinating accounts of life in the South Seas led to a rethinking on the nature of society and the political systems. Ocean travel became safer with Cook's accurate charting of the coastlines. The exploration of new markets in India and elsewhere gave an impetus to commerce, as I told you in the last class. This in turn led to the development of industry and technology, and the dissemination of ideas kept pace with the improvements in the communications network. And the pamphlet became a powerful means for debating controversial issues. For instance, the debate on the French Revolution was conducted through pamphlets. Eventually, the pamphlet was replaced by the periodical for debate on political reforms further. Parliamentary reform was inspired by the achievement of the middle class in France. Public opinion in England favored representation to big towns, leading to the passage of the Reform Bill. The Romantic writers lived through such momentous changes in the political, economic, social, and literary spheres. And the idea of revolution informed the Romantic movement from the beginning. Many major writers of this period were aware that great changes were taking place around them and that these changes would inevitably find their way into literature also. And the French Revolution seemed to be the great divide and the beginning of a new era in the history of mankind. William Hazlitt, who is another critic, has rightly observed in his book, The Spirit of the Age, I quote, there was a mighty ferment in the heads of statesmen and poets, kings and people. It was a time of promise, a renewal of the world, and of letters. I unquote. And this French Revolution swept away time honored hierarchies in different spheres, especially in the monarchy system. And the new slogans of liberty, equality, and fraternity promised a free and egalitarian society. Monarchy was abolished and the feudal structure was demolished. The principle of the dissolution of hierarchies uh, carried into literature meant that the genres of the epic and tragedy, which were at the top of the literary pyramid, had to yield place to such forms as the lyric, the ode, and the ballad. So, in language, the cultivated speech of the elite was sought to be replaced by the speech of the common people. In the choice of themes, the great events, and to make way for more commonplace incidents. The characters depicted in poetry need to not be kings or queens, humbler folks like a leech gatherer or a highland lass, or even an idiot boy was good enough for poetic composition. Thus, the French Revolution caused a democratization of literature in genre, in languages, in themes, and in characters. The spirit of the age demanded these changes, and the creative writer responded enthusiastically. So you see, what did we get out of this, by the way? By having this discussion, we got out of the French Revolution's impact on Romantic age uh, that the French Revolution impacted in various ways. so far as literature is concerned, you see, we have uh, we have the decreasing effect of tragedy and epic, right? Initially, tragedy and epic, these were two forms of uh, literature which were prevailing. Just after these, I mean, French Revolution, the outbreak of French Revolution, we have the impact of the French Revolution on the Romantic period, and that is why in the Romantic age, in the Romantic period from 1800 around 1798 to you see 1832 and 1850 roughly, we have a sort of paradigm shift so far as the selection of the themes is concerned. Okay, so initially, you see, epics and tragedies used to talk about kings, queens, and all the aristocratic people. And just after this, you see, just after the French Revolution, you will find out that the poets like Wordsworth, poets like Browning and all, Byron and all, they started talking about common people as well. That's why in William Wordsworth's poems, for example, in The Solitary Reaper, there is a common girl who is reaping and harvesting and singing a song. Similarly, in Daffodils, there's a beautiful flower that is daffodils, and daffodils is mm, not as beautiful as the rose, but yes, beautiful. And this particular common flower has got a place in the work of William Wordsworth, right? So the democratization of literature took place just after this French Revolution. So this is the effect of French Revolution that we can see on the Romantic age. All right. Yesterday we had already discussed about the definition of romantic movement or romanticism. We had also talked about the salient features of romanticism or features of romanticism yesterday. So we are not going to deal with all this. Rather, we will talk about directly the poets. So the early romantic poets. So the poets like James Thompson, as I mentioned in the introduction, James Thompson, Mark Akenside, Joseph Wattons, William Collins, Thomas Gray, William Cowper. So these were the early romantics. So the romantics can be divided into early, middle, and later romantics. So the early romantic poets are James Thompson, Mark Akenside, Joseph Watton, William Collins, Thomas Gray, William Cowper. Okay, so these are early romantic poets. And these poets actually started writing within the classical age. And that is why we can see some kinds of romantic features in them. As a result, they have been included in the romantic poets, although they have written these poems within the classical period. All right, that's why they are known as early romantic poets or early romantics. So James Thompson started is writing from 1720s and 30s to 1748. Mark Akenside started from 1740s to 1770. Joseph Wharton started from 1740 to 1800, around 1800. William Collins started from 1740 to 1759. Thomas Gray started from 1730, 40 to 1771. And William Cowper from 1750 to 1800. That's why we can say that although they have been in the classical age, we can find some of the features of the romantic age in them, and that is why they can be included as romantic poets or early romantic poets or early romantics. All right, and moving on, we have poets like Robert Burns. Robert Burns started writing around 1780s, around 1780s, and he started. Uh, he continued this till 1796. And we have one of the important important aspects of Robert Burns is the use of folk song, the use of folk song here in his poems. The Scottish patriotism in the 18th century longed for independence and unity, and Burns is the most beloved poet of the Scots. All right, so he was a Scot, or a Scottish poet, and he is also a symbol of their national spirit. because he used to deal with some of the national themes. He was interested in a number of things which were later considered essentially romantic tendencies. And he was steeped in Scottish folklore. He loved freedom and he respected the common man. He was attracted by nature, swimming against the current in his time, and he also believed that emotion was a better guide than reason. And the use of folk song, that is Scottish patriotism in the 18th century, longed for independence and unity. So it seized upon any symbol of its uniqueness. So Burns went in search of the Scottish ballad tradition, both to oppose and reject the English culture. He is probably the best 18th century example of the influence of folk poetry on mainstream English poetry. And there are two tendencies in Burns' life, by the way. First one is the cultivated tradition of polite poetry in the 18th century. The second one is a peasant poetry about peasants among whom he lived. Burns did not believe in any rules of composition, by the way, and his poetry was strongly influenced by folk poetry. So Burns used to write folk poetry, folk songs. And the folk elements in his poetry are, for example, the themes are generally death, birth, youth, old age, love, and grief. All right. And some of the seasonal activities like harvesting, May dances, and seasonal changes like snowfall and all. So normally themes are death, birth, youth, old age, love, grief, all these kinds of common themes in his folk poems. So far as the form is concerned in Burns' poetry, the form is that of a debate, a series of riddles or tests. Birds and flowers are given human qualities, and the number three is significant. Three riddles, three actions, etc. So number three, is quite important as a form in Burns' poetry. And you see, so far as the vocabulary is concerned, this vocabulary is quite simple. And many stock phrases are used, by the way, because of the oral origins of folk poetry. Stock phrases and patterns aid the memory of the oral poet. It is easy to remember. That's why folk songs or these ballads are written in common day-to-day usage. So formal devices such as the figures of speech, these are not quite used, but yes, you will find a few of them, but not as much as the usage of Milton, for example, John Milton, who was really influenced by these classical poets and writers. So far as the rhyme scheme of Burns' poetry is concerned, you see, folk poetry is not rigid in its use of rhyme as neoclassical poetry. Assonance, alliteration, and internal rhyme are common in this poetry. If you observe these poetic devices in the following line of Burns, for example, there wild woods grow and rivers row. So there is variety in rhyme schemes, by the way. And the meter in folk poetry is flexible. So Burns wrote many traditional and original songs, but he wrote three long poems. Only there was a movement favoring the short, pointed lyrics. Burns wrote a poem titled To a Mouse, which is certainly a low subject. Writing on such subjects was against the grain of neoclassicism. And another poem, for example, The Quarter's Saturday Night, shows his interest in the humble people. He had sympathy for the oppressed, sharing the ideals of the French Revolution, as we had talked about this in the last class, yesterday's class. He had expressed dangerous sentiments, such as the following just before the revolution. And the sentiments are in his own lines. I'm just reciting those. A fic for those by law protected, liberty's a glorious fist. Courts for cowards were erected, churches built to please the priest. So Burns expressed strong patriotism for Scotland. And these lines have been taken from the Jolly Beggars. Jolly Beggars. Burns expressed strong patriotism, by the way, here for Scotland because he was a Scottish and revolted against religious orthodoxy. Because at the point of time, we do have the prevalence of the Catholic Christianity sect, and he satirized a Presbyterian and Calvinist faith in Scotland in his poems as well. So, Holy Willie's Prayer and the Holy Fair These are the two important poems where these fates were criticized. And he is thus a precursor of the later romantic poets like Shelley, who re examined religious belief in a more serious way. So far as the love poems are concerned, so far as Burns is concerned, you see, My Love is Like a Red, Red Rose is one of the most important, oft quoted lines that we can see in the English literature. So this particular line has been taken from Red Red Rose. This is the name of the poem written by Robert Burns. And Robert Burns, uh, repetition as a poetic device to produce an incantatory effect may be found in this particular line. That is, my love is like a red red rose. So neoclassical poets like Pope avoided repetition for the sake of economy and for the progression of ideas. Another poem of Burns, Ye Flowery Banks, is a lament which presents a native view of the nature. So, in this girl song, the traditional rose thorn image is used to indicate laws of chastity. Happy nature is contrasted with the melancholy speaker, and there is a return to the place of former happiness. And Burns resorts to suggestion rather than direct statement in this as well as in the other poems. And these are all, by the way, intimations of romanticism, right? And that's why they are uh, they are there as early romantics and middle romantics. The range of Burns' love songs is great, by the way, and he could write of love from his personal experience and from a woman's point of view. And he could write of love in old age with equal charm. Male protectiveness appears repetitively in many of his love songs, including A Red, Red Rose. And patriotism is another recurring theme in his songs. Like Old Lang Syne is called the world's greatest song of human fellowship and friendship. Though the poetry is based on local people and situations, he is not a regional poet, by the way. He was an international poet. He stresses the elemental, the universal, and the permanent moods and thoughts in all humanity. He used the real language of man as he found it in the folk literature of his country, and thus showed the path towards worth. So his use of lowly subjects and simple diction was a worthwhile example towards Worth and to other romantic poets as well. Moving on to William Blake. Blake was born in 1757 and he wrote till 1827. And we'll discuss now William Blake, but briefly because there is a separate unit on him in his block. All right. So Blake was a man of vision who saw ultimate truth at moments of great illumination, and vision is for him the great secret of life. So his entire work, poetry or a painting, is an attempt to develop this faculty of vision so that man may seem to understand and thereby forgive and act rightly. His Songs of Innocence, published in 1789, created through a new process called illuminated printing, are examples of originality, and he equated his extreme sense of freedom and happiness to the condition of childhood. So in these poems, he says that childhood is the original state of happiness. Self enjoyment and unity are also aided to this. So in his Songs of Experience, written in 1794, he expresses his deep indignation at the hypocrisy and cruelty in the world. And in the Marriage of Heaven and Hell, he affirms the reintegration of the human soul divided by innocence, that is heaven, and experience, that is hell, through imagination. So William Blake's poetry and painting are didactic in nature. What is didactic, by the way? Yes. Everyone is listening to me, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So
Yes, sir.
what do you mean by didactic, by the way?
Sorry, sir. No idea about it.
Okay. So didactic is all about, for example, getting direct knowledge from experiences. okay, or instruction we can say. So didactic means getting knowledge or instructions from different experiences. Okay. So, so for example, a child goes to a candle, right, and that candle is burning, right, and and that candle will definitely burn your fingers, one of your fingers, right, and this is a tacit knowledge, right. Didacticism is all about getting uh, experiences from these kinds of uh, these kinds of knowledge. Not getting knowledge from these kinds of experiences, and also getting instructions as to in future that this instructions will definitely help, right, so that you will not touch in future the burning candle, right. This is all about the didactic knowledge that you can have. So poetry is Blake's poetry and painting are quite didactic in nature. So they give you instruction, right? And one of the important objectives of literature is what? Giving you, giving
Yes,
you
sir.
what? Knowledge. Giving you knowledge, giving you delight, giving you instruction as well, right? Delight means pleasure. And instruction means you see a sort of knowledge in a way, right? So Blake's poetry fulfills the very objective of literature, that is giving you what? Knowledge,
Knowledge.
giving you delight, giving you instruction. Okay, knowledge, delight, instruction. These three things are quite important for for your knowledge to increase, right? And you read literature to get these three things from literature. So he wanted people to free themselves, by the way, from convention and tradition and depend on their own institution to realize their potential. And the mystical tone, the symbols that he uses, and the revolutionary ideas and the newness of his art made people think that he was a lunatic, by the way. By the way, all these poets are considered to be lunatic. Lunatic means mad people, crazy people, right? Uh, like all the mathematics teachers, right? All these scientists, they are considered to be mad or crazy people because their ideas have not been revealed to the world, right? To the society. That is why people feel about them as if these people were lunatic people or crazy people, right? And William Blake was also perceived by common people as lunatic or crazy. Because he had some revolutionary ideas, by the way, to revolutionize the whole society. He was more revolutionary in themes, diction, technique than Burns or Wordsworth, by the way. So Robert Burns was revolutionary, but here we have William Blake, who is more revolutionary than Robert Burns or William Wordsworth. But his genius was not recognized in his lifetime, and he carved a place for himself in world literature because he swam against the current by defying reason in an age of reason, and because he gave importance to intuition and imagination in an age of scientific skepticism. Okay, right?
Sir, what does it mean by intuition?
Intuition. Intuition means, for example, when you can imagine what will happen next because of your strong sixth sense or fifth sense or any of the senses, by the way. So whatever senses you have, when you can predict what will happen next, that is intuition. Okay,
Yes.
that's how revolutionary he was, by the way. Okay, all right. We have next William Wordsworth. And yesterday we talked about William Wordsworth as one of the great romantic poets, by the way. And he is a prominent leader of the romantic movement in England because from the lyrical ballads and preface to lyrical ballads, we could get a feeling that William Wordsworth was the precursor of romantic movement. And uh, from his very preface to lyrical ballads, we get the definition of poetry. That is the romantic definition of poetry. That is, what is that? Yesterday I told you. Yes.
The definition of poetry.
Poetry. Yes.
Poetry is a spontaneous overflowing of powerful feelings and emotions as a collection of tranquility.
हाँ ठीक कहलु जे आ टिके टिके मझारे टिके एपट सेपट कर देलु ओके
अच्छा हाँ ମନେ
पोएट्री
ପଡିଲା ପଢିଲା।
so a poetry is a spontaneous overflow overflowing overflow overflow of powerful feelings and emotions as recollected in tranquility. Okay, so this is the romantic definition of poetry, by the way. That is why William Wordsworth is considered to be the precursor of romantic movement. Okay, so and also we have Saint Coleridge, by the way. I mean Samuel Taylor Coleridge, by the way, because lyrical ballads was jointly written by both of these friends. These friends, Saint Coleridge, S.T. Coleridge, and William Wordsworth. Both of them had written lyrical ballads in 1798. Okay, and the second edition was published in 1800, and later on 1802. Third edition was in 1802. In addition to many lyrics, by the way, William Wordsworth wrote the Prelude in 1850. And Prelude was like an epic, because it's a long poem, by the way, a sort of spiritual autobiography, like its subtitle, that is The Growth of a Poet's Mind. And here he talks about the growth of the poet's mind in reality, by the way, like he described in the preface to Lyrical Ballads about different stages of writing poetry, how you write a particular poem, how you compose a particular poem. So he has talked about the processes of writing poetry. Similarly, here, as the second title of this particular poem suggests, that is the prelude, the second title is The Growth of a Poet's Mind. He talks about the growth of a poet's mind here in this particular poem. And as the title suggests, it is the first of a three-part poem, by the way, The Recluse. And the second part, titled The Excursion, was published in 1814. But the third part was never written, by the way. So he had scheduled this particular poem to be a three-part poem. But two of the parts were published, by the way. But the second part was published. First part was also published, but not the last part. Last part was never published, by the way. Okay. So Wordsworth is better known for his short poems like Tintin Abbey and Immortality Ode. Okay, give me a give me 1 minute. All right. So William Wordsworth's Immortality Ode is also quite important. Tintin Abbey is also quite important. We'll talk about this a little bit, not in a complete way, by the way. So in Tintin Abbey, you will find out that there is sensuousness of animal passion, like running like a deer. He's describing this situation when he visited Tintin Abbey for the first time. He was running like a deer, like a small animal, like a small boy. All right. Just after 5 years, his perspective actually changed a little bit, and that's what is the very theme of the particular poem is. So here you have the description of two types of approaches to nature. When he was a boy and when he was a grown-up man. Just after 5 years, he became a grown-up man, and his perspective changed a little bit. You see, the first one is the sensuous animal passion. The second one is all about the moral influence, and the third one is the mystical communion. That's why you will also find descriptions of, you see, some kinds of fire is coming out of the jungle, and he is assuming, as if some hermit is there, or some of the vagrant dwellers might be causing this fire. So mystical communion is also there. And also we have moral influence, where he actually uh, mm, addresses his own sister, that is Dorothy. Dorothy Dorothy Wordsworth. All right, and he exhorts his sister to be actually happy and to be actually uh, quite motivating in future to him as well. Okay, so we have three things to take into account. We have sensuous animal passion. One, second one is moral influence. The third one is mystical communion. In Tintanabe, by the way. And Michael deals with the sturdiness of character and nature's healing power. And the five Lucy poems are also quite popular. In Ode on Intimations of Immortality, Wordsworth attributes a child's wisdom and glory to the unconscious memory of a previous life. And he is yet another, I mean, here in Resolution and Independence, uh, it is another memorable poem, and here he influenced modern thinking on the natural goodness of childhood. And the moral value of simple living and the inspiring and healing powers of nature. Almost in every poems, uh, William Wordsworth has talked about the inspiring and healing power of nature, by the way. And Wordsworth seems to have attempted to translate into action both in his life and in his work principle, like simple living and high thinking. This is one of the Aryan philosophies, by the way. Simple living, high thinking. So William Wordsworth's theory of poetry, we talked a little bit yesterday, right? And we won't go to this theory in a detailed way, by the way. So, firstly, he told us that incidents and situations should be from common life, and this is one of the effects of French Revolution, right? Secondly, a selection of language really used by men, which means it should be really used by common people. So the language should not be quite difficult, like the classical poets. Second one. This is also the effect of French Revolution. Third one is, you see, the third one is throughout the preface, he talked about simple and unelaborated expressions as his choice. And his purpose was to imitate and, as far as possible, to adopt the very language of man, and such personifications do not make any natural or regular part of that language. So he wanted uh, less flamboyance in language. He wanted simplicity in language. So Wordsworth finds a moral justification for poetry, by the way. And the aim of the poet, in his view, is to correct man's feelings and to render these feelings more consonant with eternal nature. And that is why he has talked about the philosophy of pantheism. Pantheism means, for example, God is living in every manifestation of nature, in every product of nature, we can say. So God is living in all these aspects of nature according to the pantheistic philosophy. And William Wordsworth is such a kind of poet who propagates this particular idea, or who upholds this particular idea, and he applies this idea in his poems. All right. So a poet provides us with spiritual exercises in order to give us new feelings and make our feelings more sane and pure. What do you mean by sane, by the way? SANE? SANE.
पागल
And
टाइप होते Same.
Rhymestone.
sane means pagal. কি କହିଲା?
Sir, ମୁଁ କହିଲି sir, actually sir ମୁଁ ସେଇଟା ଟିକେ ଶୁଣିଥିଲି
Opposite.
ମୁଁ complete idea ନାହିଁ but ସେଇଟା
ସେଟା
blank.
opposite ସେଇଟା. Opposite. ପାଗଳ ନୁହଁ. Insane କହିଲେ ପାଗଳ. ହେଲା? Sane କହିଲେ
Okay.
ହଁ logical.
ସୁସ୍ଥ ସୁସ୍ଥ ବି ହୁଅ
ହଁ ସୁସ୍ଥ ସୁସ୍ଥ କହିଲେ ଲଜିକାଲ ହେଲା, ମାନେ those who are quite insane, they talk about illogical stuffs, by the way. There is no any coherence in their speech. ନାଇଁ, ପାଗଳ ଲୋକମାନେ କ'ଣ କରନ୍ତି? ଏପଟ ସେପଟ କଥାବାର୍ତ୍ତା କରନ୍ତି ନା। ବର୍ତ୍ତମାନ ବୋତଲ ବିଷୟରେ କଥା ଲାଗୁଥିବେ, ବୋତଲ ହେଲା, ବୋତଲ ବିଷୟରେ କହୁଥିବେ, ସାଙ୍ଗେ ସାଙ୍ଗେ ଫୋନ ବିଷୟରେ କଥା ଲାଗିବେ ହେଲା, ଆଉ ଦୁଇଟାକୁ ରିଲେଟ୍ କରିଦେବେ, ସେମିତି କଥା। So there is illogicality or non-systemic kind of ideas they talk about. There is no any unity between and among their ideas that they talk about. So sane and insane, right? So insane is a crazy person, or an illogical person. Sane means logical. So you are with your mind. You are not out of your mind, by the way. Okay. So according to, as we have already talked about in the last class, according to William Wordsworth, poetry is the spontaneous overflow of powerful feelings, and it takes its origin from emotion recollected in tranquility. And the emotion is contemplated till, by a species of reaction, the tranquility gradually disappears, and an emotion kinder to, this, to that which was before the subject of contemplation is gradually produced. And this itself actually exists in the mind. And in this mood, successful composition generally begins, and in a mood similar to this, it is carried on. So, implicit in this explanation of how poetry is created is a psychological approach. Wordsworth discussed the difference between the language of poetry and the language of prose as well. And he says, it may be safely affirmed that there neither is nor can be any essential difference between the language of prose and metrical composition. So, according to William Wordsworth, there is no any significant difference between the language of prose and language of poetry, according to William Wordsworth. বুঝতে পারছো?
Yes,
বুঝিয়েছে
sir.
না? So 3 to 4 things he has emphasized here in the preface to lyrical ballads, and that's how we get a theory of William Wordsworth about the poem, about the poet, about how to write this poem. Okay, so this is a major point of disagreement between I will tell you the major point of disagreement between Wordsworth and Coleridge. When you see William Wordsworth says there is no any essential difference between prose and poetry. On the other hand, you see Samuel Taylor Coleridge says no, there is a difference between the language of prose and language of poetry. But according to William Wordsworth, there is no any difference between the language of poetry and the language of prose. And in the preface to lyrical ballads, he has given different examples of these poets. And by the way, this modern poems, this modern poetry, okay, is verse libre. Verse libre means what? Verse libre. Verse libre means free verse. Okay, so free verse means there is no any rule that is governing when you are writing a poem. Like John Milton is writing the Paradise Lost. Paradise Lost he is writing. So he has followed blank verse. Blank verse as a kind of particular rhyme scheme. So far as Chaucer is concerned, Chaucer has used rhyme royal stanza, right? So far as William Shakespeare's poems are concerned, sonnets are concerned, he has either taken the example of Petrarchan sonnets, or he has devised his own kind of sonnet form, right? So the modern poems or the modern poetry does not follow a particular kind of rhyme scheme like all other metrical compositions follow of William Shakespeare or John Milton or John Dryden or these poets. So verse libre means free verse. Okay. বুঝিয়েছে না?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so modern poetry is full of verse libre. Verse libre is a French expression, by the way. The phrase verse libre. Okay, so the major point of disagreement between William Wordsworth and Samuel Taylor Coleridge is that Coleridge says there is a difference between metrical composition and a prose composition. Metrical means meter. Meter means what? Poem, poetic. But on the other hand, William Wordsworth says, no, there is no any difference between a metrical composition and a prosaic or prose composition. All right. All right. Then meter holds passion in check. Also, meter seems to give poetry a kind of unreality. And that is why the end of poetry, I quote, is to produce excitement in coexistence with an overbalance of pleasure. Now, the co-presence of something regular cannot but have great efficacy in tempering and restraining the passion by an intertexture of ordinary feeling and of feeling not strictly and necessarily connected with the passion. Okay, so this is all about William Wordsworth's theory. Okay, and so far as William Wordsworth's partnership with Coleridge is concerned, this particular preface to Lyrical Ballads, the first preface was published in 1798, then the second one 1800, and the third one 1802. And both of them have dealt with a lot of poems. And the preface has been written by William Wordsworth only. Okay, let's talk about Samuel Taylor Coleridge. So from 1772 to 1834. So Coleridge tries to differentiate between the two key terms, fancy and imagination, in one of the other critical books, that is Biographia Literaria. I'm writing the name of the book, Biographia Literaria. All right, Biographia Literaria. Here, he has discriminated or differentiated between a fancy and an imagination. All right. Biography of literature. Biographia Literaria means. Okay. So he has discriminated between a fancy and an imagination. What do you mean by a fancy, by the way?
No follow up tradition.
नहीं, FANCY. FANCY. And imagination, you know this. Got the point? So he called imagination, according to S.T. Coleridge, according to Samuel Taylor Coleridge, he called imagination as the shaping and modifying power. Got the point? It can shape up your mind. It can modify your mind in a way. So imagination has that kind of a power. Okay. And fancy as the aggregative and associative power. So fancy can help you associate different ideas. Got the point? In your mind. And imagination can shape up these ideas and can modify your ideas. Got the point? That's what, and that's how we have Samuel Taylor Coleridge talking about fancy and imagination. So what is imagination? Now tell me with me. Banishri, tell me now. Banishri na Banishri? Muni, kuade golo? Ochona nai? Chota he gala, ame next class ku jiba. Ochona? Okay.
Sir,
Kon kochi
imagination means shaping and modifying. Imagination means shaping
Yes.
and modifying power.
How fancy mane?
Aggressive and associative power.
Adjective and
Associative power.
Associative power. Okay. মানে जो आइडियाज गुडी को एसोसिएट करे फैंसी हला दैट गोटे एसोसिएटिव पावर आ इमेजिनेशन कोन करे शेप करे आ मॉडिफाई करि पारे हला ए दीटा हला माने डिस्क्रिमिनेशन दीटा कांसेप्ट भितरे फैंसी आ इमेजिनेशन बुझी होची So we will stop here for this paper. And we will go to the other link. काले तुम ऐसे लिंक ये करते अच्छा तुम्हारा ग्रुप नहीं की
हाँ सर काले ग्रुप क्रिएट कर लो
करिचो समस्त करिचो तो
हाँ सर करिचो सर आपन को नंबर टा दे देथले ऐड कर दो अदरवाइज लिंक शेयर करले सर आपन टिके ऐड हे जे प्लीज
एटा मोर हैला मोर नंबर एटा समस्त लिखि नियो हैला एटा मोर व्हाट्सएप नंबर भी आ वॉइस कॉल भी हे परियो माने टॉक भी हैला कांटेक्ट नंबर भी 8144429403 हैला तमर एडमिन की होची आरती तमे अछो ना एडमिन समस्त अछो
सर समस्त अछन
हां ठीक
सर समस्त
अछि हां ऐड कर दियो संगे संगे हैला आउ सेइथरे तमे माने लिंक अछि त तम पाखरे ना मु शेयर कर देबी रो नेक्स्ट क्लास रो आरो लिंक को जीवा ना हमें
सर अच्छी
अछि ना गुड हो ताहले आरो लिंक को आसो हैला हमें इथरु
यस सर
लिस्ट कर मोर नंबर लिखलो तो आ राजकुमारी कुंडू को
यस
छंती नंबर टा को भी ऐड कर तांको नंबर टा
और
को ऐड
तांको
करो
भी ऐड करा
नाले एटा जदी हमें ये कर देबा काटी देबा ताले एटा पळी जीवो हैला केही भी तमे ऐड कर दियो ए नंबर को तापरे हमें लिंक को जीवा हैला प्रथमे ऐड करो मते कहो एनश्योर करो सुस्मिता कोन हैला कोन कहउछ की
ये व्हाट्सएप ले ही पड़ेगा जॉइन हो जाओगे
हम्म
जो प्लान है जॉइन होना है जॉइन हो जाओगे
अच्छा सुस्मिता हां देलो तो ठीक अछि एथरु भी जॉइन करी हबो ठीक जदि मोबाइल रे कनेक्ट की अछो ताले तमे जॉइन कर दियो हैला ठीक अछि राजकुमारी
यस सर
हौ ताहले हमें इथरु हमें लीव करिबा आ नेक्स्ट लिंक को जीवा हैला आरो पेपर टा पढिबा ओके